Good morning and welcome back to the Real Life Academy podcast. I am your host, Marcus Moore, and today we are going to be discussing a really interesting study on emotions that just concluded on January 12th, and the results are nothing short of stunning. So, what happened? The researchers at the University of Geneva, Switzerland, gathered 182 participants from two independent groups, okay, in an effort to understand how age affects our ability to recover from and manage our emotions. So, the study started with individuals placed under an fMRI and exposed to socio emotional videos. Now, these videos depicted a variety of adverse events like violence, suffering, and more, with the aim of eliciting a response. And what they found was shocking. The neuronal connections of the older adults showed significant resistance to change. Now, through this study, we were able to see for the first time ever, guys, how negative emotions modify our perspective. Now, we already know that through consistent negative reinforcement, our brains paint this sort of picture of how the world is, right? It gives us this sort of worldview and teaches us how to react. What we didn't know is that the same parts of the brain that create this perspective, which is the posterior cingulate cortex and the amygdala, are also strongly involved in the management of emotions and autobiographical memory. This is huge. This is huge, guys. Going back to episode 2, right? We talked about the way that stress changes the physical structure of the brain. Now, we know that the posterior cingulate cortex, the PCC, is one of the regions that are most affected by dementia and other neurodegenerative diseases. What we never understood is what hormonal or synaptic variances are causing the issue. And now we might have an insight that we've never really had before. Now, before I tell you the results of the study, you need to be aware of what we know so far. So, for the past 20 years, we've come to understand that the ability to change your emotions quickly is to the benefit of your health, right? Of your mental health. So, how quickly you recover is always more important than how you process. On the other hand, people who are unable to regulate their emotions and remain in that kind of neutral emotional state for a long period of time are at higher risks for depression. So, in other words, the longer you allow yourself to sit with and reflect on negative emotion, the higher your risk for depression. Imagine that, right? So, what we found is that the brains of patients who describe themselves as being highly empathetic often find that they remain frozen in negative thought patterns. So, it might be ruminating or drawing parallels to their own experience. So, in simple terms, we now know that people who connect on a very deep level with the suffrage of other people often experience anxiety and overthinking because they relate that suffering to their own experience of suffering or to a certain event in their life. Let me say this again. If you are empathetic and you easily connect with the suffering of other people, you are at a higher risk of developing anxiety and rumination or overthinking. Okay. So the question might then become, how do I stop being so empathetic? Right? That's natural to think. And while that may be the first thing that crosses your mind, what we really want to look at is not your ability to empathize with others, but the way you relate that empathy with a solution. You see, when you focus on pain and suffering, especially of another person, you become stuck in those feelings. The amygdala fires, cortisol floods your bloodstream, and your brain goes on red alert. There's a threat. It's here. It's inescapable, right? With this study, we have been able to understand that anxiety is not strictly environmental, but it's actually a neurological response that happens when we are unable to regulate our empathy and we go down the rabbit hole. Okay. This is where age comes into the equation. The older we get, the better we become at regulating our emotions on average, and the more easily we can focus on positive details, even during a negative event. This is all due to the evolution of the prefrontal cortex. Okay. You see, it's not the event itself that triggers the response. It is the way we analyze and interpret and ruminate or dwell on those events that triggers the response. Older people generally show a different pattern of brain activity and even physical connectivity from younger people. We figured this out by taking a look at their DMN, or their default mode network, which is a network in the brain that's activated when you're at rest. It's the default mode, right? The original installation, the way the computer runs when no one's doing anything, okay? Now, in older adults, they have an increased neural connection with the amygdala, which makes sense. This is how we learn about threats and consequences. The older you get, the more experience you have living on planet Earth, and the better your defense mechanisms become as a result of that. This is what helps us become wiser as we get older. The problem is that as we get older, people who are highly empathetic have a higher risk of getting stuck in ruminations of the past. In severe cases, they become a slave to the nostalgia, often never growing beyond a certain emotional level in their lives. So, by living in the past, it limits the brain's ability to create coping skills and defense mechanisms for the world they actually live in right now, currently. The brain becomes overloaded, it shuts down, and you ultimately regress to a mental age when everything made sense. For most people, this is between about 12 and 20 years of age. So, what does this mean? Are we going to be able to battle neurodegenerative diseases by being less empathetic? No, we're not. That's not what we're saying. However, this study has shown us that it's very possible to fight a lot of these diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia by learning skills that help us observe and not absorb emotion, to learn skills that help us not dwell on the past. You already know where I'm going with this, so let's go ahead and put it out there. If you feel like you're getting stuck in the moment, or you can't break away from your emotions, if they feel crippling, if they feel paralyzing, if you see your own suffering in others and you feel driven to help, we need to address it before it gets out of control. Send us a message, enroll for the free assessment. We have coaches who specialize in getting you back on track and helping you eliminate the drivers in your life that cause these issues. Listen, you are capable of incredible change, but it needs to start with you, and it needs to start now. Head over to RealLifeAcademy.com today, get enrolled, take control of your life. This is the only one that you're going to get. I'm Marcus Moore, and I want to thank you for taking the time to come and listen to the Real Life Academy podcast. We'll see you on the next episode.